Hello everyone, today we will follow a story full of tension and surprises. Have you ever imagined being attacked by hidden enemies, and the person you love becoming their target? Can James protect Deep and the child she's carrying? This story will keep you glued to the screen. The story revolves around CEO James, who unexpectedly becomes the target of an assassination attempt by hidden enemies. After narrowly escaping danger, James discovers that the real targets of these enemies are not just him but also Deep, the woman he loves, and the child she's carrying. James's enemies threaten to harm Deep and the unborn child if he doesn't comply with their business negotiations. James cannot stand by and let the people he loves be in danger. He is forced to choose between yielding to his enemies to protect his family or continuing to fight and face the peril. Can James maintain his career and protect the people he loves? The criminal conspiracies are pushing him into a difficult situation, forcing him to make important decisions. And will his love for Deep and the child be strong enough to help him overcome all these challenges? This story is not just about business struggles but also a lesson about love, resilience, and sacrifice in life. So, what do you think James will do to protect his family and career? Can he overcome these harsh challenges and uncover the truth behind this conspiracy? Don't miss the next episodes of this thrilling story. To make sure you don't miss any videos, be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell today. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. After CEO James narrowly escaped the assassination attempt, he felt like he was living in an endless nightmare. The enemies behind the attack didn't just want to take him down, they also wanted to threaten the most important people in his life. Although James was fortunate to escape unharmed, he couldn't help but worry about what would come next. But what terrified him more than anything was the safety of Deep, the woman he loved deeply, and the child she was carrying in her womb. Deep was James's only source of comfort during these difficult times. She was not only the person he loved but also his companion through his hardest moments. However, James knew that in this ruthless and treacherous world, she could not be kept safe unless he took effective measures to protect her. That was why every thought of Deep filled him with an overwhelming sense of anxiety. Not to mention, the unborn child was the source of even greater pain. The child hadn't even been born yet, but its presence had created an invisible force, driving James to do whatever it took to keep them safe from any dangers. The warning from his enemies was impossible for James to ignore. They didn't just threaten him, they also targeted the woman he loved and his unborn child. What they said really sent a chill down his spine. If you don't comply with the business demands, we won't hesitate to harm Deep and her child. This wasn't an empty threat, it was a direct statement of the cruelty his enemies were capable of. James knew that if he didn't handle this matter quickly and effectively, he and his loved ones would have to pay a terrible price. These enemies, although still faceless, were powerful, ruthless people who would do anything to achieve their goals. They wanted control, and they wouldn't stop at empty threats. James realized that this attack was just the beginning of a long battle that he couldn't avoid. He knew that if he didn't remain decisive and level-headed, not only would he bear the consequences, but Deep and the innocent child would also suffer. Every day that passed, James's anxiety grew. He couldn't focus on work because he knew that Deep was in constant danger. His enemies were not just some competitors in business, they were people who would destroy his entire family for the sake of power and greed. James had faced many challenges in his career, but this time, his adversaries weren't just companies or rival individuals. They were people willing to destroy his family for their own selfish purposes. The situation became even more critical when James learned that the enemy had tracked down Deep's location and was planning to approach her. His heart sank at the thought. He couldn't let the woman he loved live in constant fear. He couldn't let a pregnant woman face the dangers that he was unable to protect her from. And what terrified him even more was knowing that if she was harmed, the unborn child would not be safe either. Thus, James's decision became increasingly clear. He couldn't live in this constant state of fear any longer. The safety of Deep and the child was the most important thing to him. And if he had to do anything to protect them, James wouldn't hesitate. Compromising in business with his enemies might be something he didn't want, but if that was the price to pay to protect the ones he loved, he would accept it. Throughout his life, as he entered this world full of schemes and dangers, he had never felt more clearly what love and responsibility truly meant. In a world full of scheming and treachery, James understood that sometimes sacrifice and compromise were the keys to protecting those he loved. And because of that, he wouldn't let anything or anyone threaten the happiness of Deep and their unborn child. The situation became increasingly tense, causing James to lose control of his emotions. After hearing the threats from his enemies, his anxiety grew stronger. To protect Deep and the unborn child she carried, he was forced to make more difficult decisions than ever before. Every time he thought about the current situation, he felt like he was standing at a crossroads, unsure of what path to take. But what mattered most was that he couldn't let the people he loved suffer any harm. His enemies were not only skilled in strategy and scheming, but they were also cold-hearted and ruthless. Their warning was a harsh blow to James. He couldn't sit back and wait for danger to approach, especially when Deep's and the child's lives were at stake. His calmness and composure during his years in the ruthless business world no longer seemed to be the only protection. James realized that he had to change his strategy to deal with the current situation. While his career had always been his top priority, everything had changed now. James began to feel the pressure of his personal life more than ever before. Business meetings and negotiations, which used to consume all his focus, now seemed meaningless if he couldn't protect Deep and her child. What should he do to not only maintain his career but also keep his family safe? He knew that he couldn't continue to be immersed in business struggles while ignoring the more precious things, love and family. James started to reconsider his business partners and relationships. He no longer thought about expansion or competing to win deals. Instead, he focused on minimizing risks, forming agreements with partners who could guarantee his and his family's safety. Although he didn't want to, compromising with his enemies had become part of his strategy. James understood that, in this battle, maintaining life and protecting his family was more important than any business victory. In the following days, James had little time to rest. Every minute felt like a heavy burden of anxiety and worry pressing down on him. He constantly had to meet with partners, but his mind was always on deep safety. Each call, each business negotiation became a battle he had to face. He knew he couldn't show any weakness, couldn't let his enemies see his fear. They would exploit that vulnerability to strike, and this time, they might not stop at mere threats. However, James still had to continue working. He couldn't halt his career or his business. He began to realize an important truth: to protect his family, he couldn't rely on his own strength alone. He needed help from those around him, people he could trust. But in this world full of schemes, seeking help wasn't easy. James couldn't help but feel the loneliness during this time, as everyone around him could potentially be an enemy. He knew that in these battles full of strategy, nothing was certain. Sometimes, victory wasn't about winning everything but about finding ways to protect what mattered most. For him, that was Deep and her unborn child, people he had to protect at all costs. That was why, even though he was forced to compromise, James remained determined not to let anyone harm them. Every day, the anxiety inside James grew. He couldn't forget the image of Deep standing by his hospital bed, her eyes red from crying, her worried gaze fixed on him. She had already gone through so much stress and hardship during this time. He couldn't let her endure anymore. His love for her and their unborn child had become a powerful motivation, driving James to keep fighting, not only in business but also in the battle to protect his family. With the threats closing in, James knew he couldn't wait any longer. He had to act, find a way to both preserve his career and protect his family. And in that moment, he understood that sometimes compromise wasn't a defeat but a necessary step to protect the more precious things in life. James began to feel the increasing tension within himself as the days passed, and his constant worry about the safety of Deep and the unborn child she carried never left him. Each passing day was a battle within himself, as every decision he made carried sacrifice and risk. He could no longer live caught between his career and his family. Both, no matter how important, needed protection, but to achieve that, James realized that he had to completely change his approach. For all this time, James had focused on work and business strategies to achieve great success. But now, his career was no longer the top priority. The safety of Deep and her unborn child was everything to him. He knew that if he didn't change his way of thinking and acting, their lives would always be under threat from the ruthless forces outside. One night, as James sat alone in his office, the dim light reflecting on his face, he suddenly realized that he couldn't simply give in to every demand from his enemies. He couldn't live his life in constant fear, allowing his enemies to dictate his every move. But how could he protect his family while also maintaining his career without compromising his integrity? That was the question James had been facing for a long time. Then, an idea suddenly flashed in his mind. He didn't have to give in to everything. Instead, he could find a way to make his enemies understand that, although James could yield on certain matters, he would never accept them threatening those he loved. This would require cleverness and careful planning, not just agreeing or refusing outright. James decided to approach this confrontation from a different angle. Instead of fighting his enemies head-on, he would find a way to restrain them, making them wary and reluctant to continue threatening his family. He knew that to do this, he would need help from those around him, people he could trust. But in a world full of scheming, seeking help was not easy. James couldn't help but feel the loneliness during this time, as everyone around him could potentially be an enemy. He knew that in these battles, nothing was certain. Sometimes, victory wasn't about winning everything but about protecting what mattered most. For him, that was Deep and her unborn child, people he had to protect at all costs. That's why, even though he had to compromise, James remained determined not to let anyone harm them. Every day, the anxiety within James grew. He couldn't forget the image of Deep standing by his hospital bed, her eyes red from crying, her worried gaze fixed on him. She had already gone through so much stress and hardship during this time. He couldn't let her endure anymore. His love for her and their unborn child had become a powerful motivation, driving James to keep fighting, not only in business but also in the battle to protect his family. With the threats closing in, James knew he couldn't wait any longer. He had to act quickly and decisively to preserve his career and protect his family. And in that moment, he understood that sometimes compromise wasn't a defeat but a necessary step to protect the more precious things in life. This story truly evokes a lot of deep emotions and suspense. From the tense situations James faces to the difficult decisions he has to make, everything is well crafted and captivating. The story is not only about struggles in the business world but also about the fight to protect family, love, and survival. The conspiracies, threats, and the tense relationships between the characters keep the viewer on edge, always eager to find out what happens next. What stands out is James's sacrifice, as he is willing to give up everything to protect the ones he loves and the unborn child. The story is not just a battle against criminal forces but also a lesson about resilience, love, and determination in life. It makes me reflect on what truly matters in life and the choices we face when confronted with challenges. This is certainly a story worth following, and I can't wait to see the surprises that lie ahead.